marketing research, another subcategory of marketing. Note that when I got my undergraduate degree, I took an introduction to marketing class, and then I took an advertising class. I took a marketing research class. So I had an entire course, an entire semester long course just on market research. We did a market research project. I actually studied, does price affect whether you will buy a wine or not? And I talked about, male versus female. Are males more likely to pay more for wine? Are females more likely to pay for more expensive wine? And does that affect their buying decision? And I did it through a website called SurveyMonkey. I built a survey. I sent it out. I had about 200 people respond. And then I took my survey results and then compiled a model. There's a lot of regression and math involved when you get really deep into it. And, then made a summary of all my findings. And so similarly, that's what marketing research is all about. It's getting information and making better marketing decisions based on that information. Now, there's a couple ways of obtaining information. Some of it already exists. For example, if you have a Facebook account and you are a business, Facebook gives you all the information as far as male or female. What time of the day are people on your Facebook page? How many people clicked a certain link? How many people like something versus not liking it? You get to see, the angry face. There's many ways in which you can interpret the data, but there's also just so much data at your fingertips already. Another thing you could do is just ask direct questions. And like I said in my class, I made a survey. You can make a survey as easy as this, though. You could simply, I don't know if any of you have been to the post office lately. They have this at the post office. It doesn't say restroom, though. It just says, how is your experience at the post office today? And instead of even having numbers or words, it's just simply symbols. And you can see there's happy, kind of happy, not so happy. I'm really sad is the last one, yeah. Or however you interpret that. And that's one of the hard parts about marketing research is different people will interpret your questions differently. So it's really important to make the surveys and make sure you're getting valid information. And there's a couple different ways to do that they talk about in the textbook as far as the way you word the questions and the way you allow them to answer. You can also do things like focus groups where you actually observe people's behaviors as well. Just right off the bat, something I've done SurveyMonkey, we've done surveys, I've done things like this. One of the actually most easy things to do that when I was working in marketing for a retail store, the easiest thing to do was whenever we had a large sale at this one particular company I worked at about every 3 months, and it allowed people into our warehouse. It was our warehouse sale. And they were a really good deal. So a lot of people were drawn in by this, and we did a lot of advertising. The thing is, we did so much advertising, we didn't know where they were coming from. Were they coming from the newspaper? Were they coming from Craigslist? Were they coming from our TV ads? Were they coming from our email list? Where were they coming from? So what we did was we had either myself or someone else in the marketing department sit outside of the event in the main entrance with a clipboard and just ask people verbally. That was the other thing. By asking them verbally, we can make sure we check the right box. When you just hand somebody something, they may or may not do it. They may not understand it correctly. So we actually got really good information, and that was how we evaluated whether we should spend more advertising dollars on newspaper or print or Craigslist online advertising, email marketing, etc. It was actually very helpful information. And all that is marketing data. If you work in retail right now, just simply asking people, oh, how'd you hear about us? Great question to ask. Great data that can really help a business. So marketing research is the process of defining a marketing problem and opportunity, systematically collecting and analyzing information, and recommending actions. I like the word systematically because although I just told you two stories that didn't necessarily seem very scientific or perfect, there actually was a lot of thought put into how to collect that data and how do we collect it in a way that it's true and it's not biased, it's not incorrect or invalid. So it's very important that we spend time making sure we're collecting good data, because imagine if it's bad data, if it's misleading data, that could be a problem. Here is the kind of the bulk of the chapter, especially for an introduction to marketing class. You might have also learned this in a statistics class as well. This kind of the fundamentals of business, the difference between secondary and primary. Secondary data are things that already exist. You can you can search online right now and get this data for free. It already exists. Sometimes you have to pay for secondary data. Sometimes it's free. The biggest thing happening right now is the U.S. You see here, the U.S. Census. Every 10 years, our government or a government agency will go ahead and hand a survey to every single household in America, or the majority of them. And in there is some questions. What was your family income? How many people live at this house? How much money do you earn a year? And then the U.S. Census Bureau can collect all that data. And right now, you can go to the U.S. Census website, and you, as an individual, or if you're an owner of a company, can use that data to make better marketing decisions. It already exists. You don't have to make a survey. It's just there for free. It's amazing. So that's actually happening right now. We're doing the 2020 U.S. Census right now, and that information should be available in a year or so, maybe sooner. All right, so that's secondary. The other one is primary. That's when you, as an individual or a company, will go out and actually do the marketing research yourself. So that could be doing a focus group. That could be making a survey. What else do they have here? Social media, right? Using your own social media marketing and social media to use that data. That includes like Google Analytics, Facebook data, Twitter data, a lot of data already out there. Having a panel is similar to like observational data where you watch people. Running experiments, which is similar to observational data you could do. And then asking questions, right? Surveys. And you can ask them verbally, like I told you earlier, or you can go ahead and ask them, on like a written piece of paper, or SurveyMonkey, an online survey. And, usually people will do a survey if you give them some kind of incentive. So, giving a free gift card or something like that can be very helpful. And then lastly, I just want to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of each. So, secondary data. Remember, this is data that already exists. What are the advantages? Time saving. That I can just go on my computer right now and start searching this secondary data. Imagine the opposite of primary data, designing a survey, finding enough people to send the survey to, making sure the survey data is legitimate. Then I have to compile. I have to get all that data and turn it into something that, you can pass along and make a better understanding of all this data, right? Because if you just have numbers, what do these numbers mean? And it's inexpensive. Like I said, the U.S. Census is free. So some of this data already exists. You don't have to pay somebody to compile the data, to build the survey, to collect the survey, to pay the participants in the survey. So disadvantage is out of date. So luckily the U.S. Census is doing their data right now, but if you were looking at 2010 data, it happens every 10 years. And you were doing it in 2019, for example, that's 9 years old of data. How accurate could that be? Definitions, categories, not right. Yes. So you might be trying to find out who drinks soda, who drinks caffeinated soda, and maybe the data only tells you who drinks soda. And so that information isn't useful to you because you're trying to break it down into caffeinated versus non-caffeinated, caffeine versus no caffeine. So when you have secondary data, you're at mercy. You can only use what's in front of you. And if the question you're trying to answer isn't answered in this secondary data, you can be left, having to do primary data. And similar to the last point, not specific enough. So this is almost like the opposite, right? So the advantages of primary data, it's more flexible. You get to create the questions and get your answers answered. And it's more specific to your specific industry or business, because you might have a specific problem you're trying to solve. You can just go directly to that. Now, obviously, the big downside is pretty obvious. It costs money to do this, and it takes time. let's say this morning I woke up, I want to get some survey data answered. It's very unlikely I can get 200 people by the end of the day, where it could take me a week or so to build the survey, to send it out, to get all the responses back, give people enough time, 24, 48 hours to finish the data. Then I have to take the data, compile it, make a report, and then look at the data. So, that is a more time-consuming process. So there's an introduction to marketing research at the very low level. It gets very advanced. There's a lot of, data that can be collected and mined, and it's its own class. There's just so much going into this. Facebook and Google and all these companies are collecting more and more data and trying to understand their customers more and more. So this whole, market research and understanding the consumer is just going to get, closer and closer. They probably know a lot more about you than you know about yourself at this point, which can be scary on the opposite side, which opens up a lot of questions about consumer privacy. But we're not going there in this chapter. We're simply discussing, how companies use marketing research to make better decisions.